The soft glow of candlelight danced across the faces of the family members gathered around the dinner table, casting a warm ambience over the room. The aroma of freshly cooked food filled the air, mingling with the sound of clinking glasses and joyous laughter. It was a night of celebration, a momentous occasion marking the engagement of Stephen and his fiancée Evelyn. Susan watched fondly as her brother and his fiancée exchanged loving glances, their happiness palpable. Stephen's mother, Helen, beamed with pride, her eyes shining with tears of joy as she raised her glass in a toast. To Stephen and Evelyn, she said, her voice filled with emotion, "May your love continue to grow stronger with each passing day." The sentiment was echoed around the table as the family clinked their glasses together, sharing in the joy of the moment. Stephen leaned over to plant a tender kiss on Evelyn's cheek, his eyes shining with love and affection. "I can't believe this is finally happening," he whispered to her, his voice filled with excitement. Evelyn's smile widened as she reached for Stephen's hand, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "I've been dreaming of this moment since the day we met," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. As the night wore on, the family indulged in delicious food and lively conversation, cherishing each moment together. Susan couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth and contentment as she looked around the table at her loved ones, grateful for the bond they shared. Little did she know, however, that the joyous atmosphere would soon be overshadowed by Evelyn's unexpected demand, setting off a chain of events that would test the strength of their family ties. The mood around the table shifted imperceptibly as Evelyn's demeanor took on a more determined edge. Her smile, once bright and charming, now held a hint of steel as she cleared her throat to address the family. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Evelyn began, her voice carrying an authoritative tone that caught everyone's attention. "Stephen and I have something important to discuss with you." Stephen's mother, Helen, glanced at her son with a mixture of curiosity and concern, sensing the gravity of Evelyn's words. Susan furrowed her brow, exchanging a worried look with her mother, unsure of what was about to unfold. "With our engagement comes the excitement of planning our future together," Evelyn continued, her gaze sweeping across the table. "And part of that future includes a celebration worthy of our love." Helen nodded, her smile faltering slightly as she sensed the direction of Evelyn's words. "Of course, dear," she said cautiously. "We're all here to support you and Stephen in any way we can." "That's very kind of you, Helen," Evelyn replied, her tone betraying a hint of impatience. "But what Stephen and I need from you is financial support." Stephen's eyes widened in surprise, his mouth opening to speak before Evelyn raised a hand to silence him. "We've decided to have an extravagant engagement party next month," she continued, her voice firm. "And we expect each member of the family to contribute." Susan's jaw dropped in disbelief, her mind reeling at the audacity of Evelyn's demand. "But Evelyn, an extravagant party can be quite costly," she interjected, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Are you sure this is necessary?" Evelyn's smile tightened, her eyes narrowing as she turned to face Susan. "Of course it's necessary," she snapped, her patience wearing thin. "This is a celebration of our love, and it's only fitting that Stephen's family contributes to the festivities." Stephen shifted uncomfortably in his seat, torn between loyalty to his fiancée and concern for his family's financial well-being. "Evelyn, perhaps we should discuss this further in private," he suggested, his voice tinged with uncertainty. But Evelyn shook her head, her resolve unwavering. "There's nothing to discuss, Stephen," she insisted, her tone final. "This is what's expected of us, and your family needs to do their part." As the weight of Evelyn's demand settled over the table, tension hung in the air, casting a shadow over the once joyous celebration. Little did they know, this demand would be the catalyst for a series of events that would test the strength of their family bonds like never before. The air in the room grew heavy with tension as Evelyn's demand hung over the family like a dark cloud. Susan shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting between Stephen, Evelyn, and their mother Helen. She couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of her stomach. Helen's expression was a mixture of disbelief and dismay as she processed Evelyn's demand. "I'm sorry, Evelyn, but $25,000 is a significant amount of money," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not sure we can afford to contribute that much to the engagement party." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her patience wearing thin at Helen's hesitance. Stephen's family is expected to contribute to the celebration, she insisted, her tone bordering on arrogance. It's tradition, Helen. Surely you understand that. Stephen shifted uncomfortably in his seat, torn between his loyalty to Evelyn and his concern for his mother's well-being. Evelyn, perhaps we could discuss this later, he suggested, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I'm sure we can find a compromise that works for everyone. But Evelyn shook her head, her resolve unwavering. There's nothing to discuss, Stephen, she retorted, her tone firm. This is what's expected of us, and your family needs to do their part. Susan felt a surge of anger rise within her as she watched Evelyn dismiss her mother's concerns so callously. Evelyn, you can't just demand money from Stephen's family without considering their financial situation, she interjected, her voice laced with frustration. It's disrespectful and entitled. Evelyn's eyes flashed with irritation at Susan's words, her patience wearing thin. This is none of your business, Susan, she snapped, her tone sharp. Stephen and I have made our decision, and your opinion is irrelevant. Helen reached out a hand to Susan, a silent gesture of support in the face of Evelyn's arrogance. I appreciate your concern, Susan, she said, her voice filled with gratitude, but I think it's best if we discuss this as a family and come to a decision together. But Evelyn scoffed at Helen's suggestion, her sense of entitlement blinding her to the pain she was causing. There's nothing to discuss, she insisted, her voice cold. Either you contribute to the engagement party or you'll be cut off from the wedding entirely. As Evelyn's ultimatum hung in the air, a heavy silence descended over the room, casting a shadow over the once joyous celebration. Little did they know this moment would be the beginning of a rift that would test the bonds of their family like never before. Susan could no longer sit idly by as Evelyn's demands continued to escalate, threatening to tear their family apart. With a deep breath, she rose from her seat, her eyes blazing with determination as she confronted Stephen and Evelyn. Evelyn, you can't just demand money from Mom like this, Susan stated firmly, her voice unwavering. It's not fair to put this kind of pressure on her. Stephen shifted uncomfortably in his seat, torn between his loyalty to Evelyn and his desire to keep the peace within the family. Susan, please, he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. This is between Evelyn and Mom. We don't need your input. But Susan shook her head, refusing to back down. No, Stephen, this concerns all of us, she insisted, her tone resolute. We're family and we should be making decisions together, not dictating terms to each other. Helen reached out a hand to Susan, grateful for her daughter's support in the face of Evelyn's demands. Thank you, Susan, she said, her voice filled with emotion. I appreciate you speaking up for me. Evelyn's eyes flashed with irritation at Susan's interference, her sense of entitlement blinding her to the pain she was causing. This is none of your business, Susan, she snapped, her tone sharp. Stephen and I have made our decision, and your opinion is irrelevant. But Susan refused to be silenced, her resolve unwavering. It is my business when my family is being treated unfairly, she retorted, her voice tinged with frustration. We should be supporting each other, not tearing each other down. As the tension in the room reached a boiling point, Susan's words hung in the air, casting a shadow over the once joyous celebration. Little did they know, this moment would be the catalyst for a series of events that would test the bonds of their family like never before. The tension in the room reached a breaking point as Evelyn's demands clashed with Susan's insistence on fairness and unity within the family. Despite Evelyn's attempts to brush off Susan's concerns, the truth behind her manipulation was about to be laid bare. Susan had spent countless hours gathering evidence, determined to expose the extent of Evelyn and Stephen's deceit. With a sense of urgency, she presented her findings to the family, laying out the financial discrepancies and manipulative tactics employed by the couple. Helen, I think you need to see this, Susan said, her voice steady as she handed her mother a stack of documents. It's important that we understand the full extent of Evelyn and Stephen's demands. Helen's eyes widened in shock as she flipped through the pages, each one revealing a new layer of deceit and manipulation. I had no idea, she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. How could they do this to us? Stephen's face paled as he realized the gravity of Susan's accusations, his attempts to defend Evelyn falling on deaf ears. I can explain, he stammered, his voice trembling with uncertainty. It's not what you think. But Susan shook her head, her resolve unwavering. The evidence speaks for itself, Stephen, she said firmly. You and Evelyn have been exploiting our family for your own gain. And it stops now. Evelyn's facade of confidence crumbled as Susan's accusations hit home, her sense of entitlement crumbling in the face of the truth. This is outrageous, she exclaimed, her voice tinged with desperation. You have no right to accuse us of such things. But Susan stood her ground, refusing to be swayed by Evelyn's protests. We deserve to know the truth, she insisted, her voice unwavering. And now that it's out in the open, we can finally put an end to this manipulation. As the weight of Susan's revelations settled over the room, a heavy silence descended, casting a shadow over the once joyous celebration. Little did they know this moment would be the beginning of a journey towards healing and redemption for their fractured family. As the truth behind Evelyn and Stephen's manipulation came to light, the family found themselves grappling with the stark contrast between their actions and those of Susan, whose integrity and resilience shone brightly in comparison. Susan stood tall, her unwavering commitment to justice serving as a beacon of strength for the family in the face of adversity. Her determination to expose the truth and stand up for what was right set her apart from Evelyn and Stephen's deceitful actions. I can't believe they would do this to us, Helen murmured, her voice filled with sorrow as she processed the extent of Evelyn and Stephen's betrayal. How could they be so selfish? Susan reached out a hand to her mother, offering comfort in the midst of turmoil. It's not your fault, Mom, she said gently. We're stronger together and we'll get through this. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Stephen's downfall became increasingly apparent as their sense of entitlement and greed led to their ultimate undoing. With each passing day, their once promising future crumbled before their eyes, leaving them isolated and alone. I never thought it would come to this, Stephen whispered, his voice tinged with regret as he watched his dreams slip away. I just wanted the best for us. But Evelyn's facade of confidence began to crack under the weight of their deceit, her desperation for control driving a wedge between them and the family they had once relied on for support. We can't let them tear us apart, she insisted, her voice laced with desperation as she clung to the remnants of their shattered dreams. We have to fight for what's ours. Yet despite Evelyn's protests, the family remained united in their determination to move forward, guided by Susan's unwavering commitment to honesty and integrity. We'll get through this together, Susan declared, her voice filled with conviction as she looked around at her family, and we'll come out stronger on the other side. As the contrast between Susan's resilience and Evelyn and Stephen's downfall became increasingly apparent, the family found solace in the knowledge that their bonds were stronger than any deceit or manipulation. Little did they know, this moment would be the beginning of a journey towards healing and redemption for their fractured family. In the aftermath of the turmoil caused by Evelyn and Stephen's deceit, the family found themselves at a crossroads, faced with the opportunity for redemption and healing. With Susan's unwavering guidance and the strength of their familial bonds, they embarked on a journey towards forgiveness and reconciliation. Susan took the lead, her determination to mend their fractured family serving as a guiding light for the rest of them. With each passing day, she worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and understanding among them, refusing to let the wounds of the past define their future. We can't change what happened, Susan said, her voice filled with determination as she addressed the family. But we can choose how we move forward from here. Helen nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with gratitude for Susan's unwavering support. You're right, Susan, she said, her voice filled with emotion. We need to focus on rebuilding our family and moving past this. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Stephen found themselves at a crossroads of their own, grappling with the consequences of their actions and the realization that their deceit had cost them everything they held dear. I never thought it would come to this, Stephen whispered, his voice tinged with regret as he reflected on the events that had led them to this point. I wish I could go back and make things right. Evelyn's facade of confidence crumbled as she faced the harsh reality of their situation, her desperation for control giving way to a newfound sense of humility and remorse. We've hurt so many people, she admitted, her voice filled with sorrow as she looked around at the family they had betrayed. I don't know if we'll ever be able to make things right. But Susan remained steadfast in her belief that redemption was possible, her unwavering commitment to forgiveness serving as a beacon of hope for them all. "We've all made mistakes," Susan said, her voice filled with compassion as she reached out to Evelyn and Stephen. "But it's never too late to make amends and start anew." As the family came together to embrace the possibility of redemption, they found solace in the knowledge that their bonds were stronger than any mistake or betrayal. With Susan leading the way, they embarked on a journey towards healing and reconciliation, determined to forge a brighter future together. Little did they know, this moment would be the beginning of a new chapter for their family, filled with love, forgiveness, and the promise of redemption.